Alright everyone, it's Sierra Nova here, and today we're going to be getting into an animated series called Castlevania. It's going to be somewhat of a review, and I gotta say I kinda don't even know where to begin. I think I saw this series a lot in passing, but never really gave it the time of day. But surprisingly, it is perfect, and I regret not starting it sooner. I think this series did a really good job reeling me in from the very beginning. So what is Castlevania even about, you ask? So Castlevania is about an angry vampire and a vampire hunter trying to stop him. At least that's how it started. It's a little bit more to the series than that, seeing as we get multiple perspectives along the way. Anyway, the angry vampire I was referring to is named Dracula, and he has a pretty good reason to be angry. The story behind Dracula and his second wife Lisa was a touching one, but ended quite tragically, and this was his main reason for basically waging war on humanity. Now Lisa was basically accused of being a witch, and unfortunately she was set on fire. But I must say, making Dracula angry was a huge misstep. I mean, set someone on fire is wrong period, but maybe not do it to the wife of Dracula. Anyway, let's get into things. I'm going to try to review things as organized as possible. I'll kind of touch on a little bit of everything in the order that I remember seeing it, and the things that interested me more. Then if needed, I'll go into more depth later on. Alright, so let's kick things off with Trevor, Belmont, and Syfa. I think these are the first two characters that we're introduced to that are important besides Dracula and Lisa. Now remember that vampire hunter I mentioned earlier? That would be this guy right here. I believe the first time we saw Trevor was in a bar, so from the get-go we were made aware that Trevor enjoyed a drink here or there, which is not a problem, no judgment at all on my end, but later on we learned that he belonged to the Belmont lineage and is the only one left. His family fought weird creatures and demon-like beings that showed up, doing a really good service to the people for years. However, the Belmont family was cast aside by the church, as the church claimed that they were killing God's creatures or something ridiculous along those lines. No surprise that the church was later revealed to be pretty corrupt and twisted, especially back in that time period when witchcraft was feared, and there's probably still some corruption even to this day. There are a lot of good people in every place and occupation you can think of, but there are also a few that are a little warped and not too far behind, unfortunately. Anyhow, we have Syfa, who is a speaker magician, and I have to say I'm impressed with her as a character. She carries herself so well that she was able to fight alongside Trevor and Alucard later on as an equal against Dracula. I know that probably sounds weird, but in anime I typically see female characters treated as damsels in distress or simply left in the shadows and forgotten about altogether. Launch from Dragon Ball is a really good example of this. We saw her in Dragon Ball, and I don't think we ever saw her again besides that one time when she was at a bar in Dragon Ball Z. And I'm not even going to get started on Sakura from Naruto. Anyway, the point is that Syfa was neither a damsel in distress nor abandoned. It was pretty refreshing to see. It's always fun seeing her fight, and it was always fun seeing her on screen. In addition, I have to admit that I shamelessly fangirled when Trevor and Syfa later got together because I was rooting for them the whole time. I just knew something was there and something was gonna come of their relationship, and lo and behold, I was right. Okay, so let's get into Alucard's introduction. Alucard is the son of Dracula and Lisa, so he's a half vampire, half human. Not only that, his first appearance is pretty cool, and we're granted a little scuffle between him, Trevor, and Syfa. At first, Syfa mistakenly thought Alucard was a savior of some sort, but that was cleared up pretty quickly. I will say that one thing I found pretty interesting is that Alucard takes more after his mother, and I guess a small part of me didn't expect that, to be honest. I'm still not sure why. Anyhow, Dracula wanted to eradicate all of humanity for their crime against Lisa. It was such an evil thing for them to do, and all Lisa wanted to do was help the people of Wallachia. It's extremely tragic that her good intentions and kindness were met with such evil. What made me a bit angry was that she offered to leave town, and they didn't seem pleased by that. It was almost as if the church affiliates wanted to make an example out of her. But even at that moment, if anyone happened to notice, Lisa was still shown to be pretty worried about what happened to the people of Wallachia and how Dracula would take it. Lisa had even acknowledged just how far Dracula had come compared to who he used to be when they first met. And it was almost as if Lisa knew that her death would spark a war, if not something horrible. On the other hand, while Alucard did grieve the loss of his mother, he didn't grieve it to the extreme Dracula did. Dracula was willing to commit genocide over it, while Alucard was willing to stop Dracula, even if it meant killing his own father. I'm sure that took a lot of resolve because we saw just how shaken up Alucard was over it, and to be honest, I'm surprised he was able to follow through with it. I thought he would hesitate, try to talk things out, or even change his mind, but that wasn't the case. Next up, we have Isaac and Hector. So when we first met Isaac and Hector, it was through the association of Dracula. I don't know how or when they aligned with him, but they seem to bear a common enemy, humanity. I don't remember seeing much about Hector's past, but we did get to see a bit of Isaac's, and it's pretty sad. We see Isaac being whipped by someone claiming to do it out of love. Now I can't remember who this person is exactly, and maybe I missed that part, but Isaac begged him not to do it, yet his pleas went unheard. Fed up, Isaac ended up taking matters into his own hands, as well as his eyes. I will say it's very clear and apparent that Isaac does not like humans. That is far more apparent in him than it is in Hector. We see this with Isaac continuously, and unfortunately that does nothing but deepen his hatred towards humanity. It is a really tragic case, to be honest. We saw this with Isaac with his first flashback that granted us a peek at his past. We saw this when he was approached by several men while he was in a desert of some sort, not to mention that time he received a little magic box that had mirror fragments inside to form or reflect desires, and immediately after he stepped out, Isaac was confronted by evil villagers. And then again, he was confronted after he went in separate ways with the captain, who managed to strike up a deal to protect not only himself, but his crewmates as well. At this point, I pitied Isaac. I really didn't want him to be right, but he kinda is, at least right about the type of humans he's constantly encountering at the time. Okay, so the next part I kind of want to talk about involves Carmilla. So if I have to be honest, I didn't feel one way or the other about Carmilla's appearance. When we first saw her approach Dracula, I kind of felt like she was trying to stir up trouble a bit, because among other things, she openly asked him about why he never turned his wife. I think that was probably one of the questions on everyone's mind, so she probably was right in that aspect. However, I had no idea how evil this woman really was. I started to dislike her very quickly, especially seeing how she treated Hector.
I intend to take advantage of that. But I need my strength returned. I need a horde as Dracula had. And you are a forge master. You will create the horde for me.
Go to hell.
Now, I mentioned a little bit about Hector and Isaac earlier. Isaac was incredibly loyal to Dracula, and Dracula sent him on way to protect him, moved by Isaac's gesture and immense desire to protect him. As for Hector, it was later revealed that he had been turned against Dracula, or rather manipulated by Carmilla. To put it bluntly, Hector didn't receive the same grace as Isaac did. He was treated far worse, and maybe some people feel like he deserved it for betraying Dracula, but personally I don't think anyone, let alone Hector, deserved the type of harsh and cruel treatment that she gave him. Not only did she convince him to betray Dracula and basically defect, but she had her minions put a collar around his neck and then beat the crap out of him. If you think it stopped there, you're horribly mistaken, because afterwards she forced him to come along with her and then tells him that he's going to spend the rest of his life using his capabilities as a forge master to create an army for her. Enslaved and beaten, Hector is forced to accompany her to Styria on foot for miles and miles. Hector didn't have any shoes on or anything, and there was no telling what kind of conditions he endured beyond the ones we saw. To make matters worse, once they finally arrived at her base, Hector is stripped down to his birthday suit and thrown in a cell. And as if Carmilla thought it would do him some sort of justice, she instructed the others to feed him once a day, and we see the food and it's clearly moldy and bug infested. It was really disgusting, and it's a really horrible way to treat a human being. I felt really bad for Hector. Sure, he aligned himself with vampires by aligning with Dracula, but it seems as if Hector needed to look out for other vampires and maybe not humans like he may have initially thought. Now, since we're on the topic of Hector, let's get into Lenore and Hector. Now, I had mixed feelings about these two, especially in the beginning. And I gotta admit, I experienced a little bit of confusion because I felt like Lenore was just manipulating him and using a more peaceful means just to lure him in. After all, he outright despised Carmilla, and rightfully so. But I think I started to like these two as we saw more moments of them. I genuinely believed that they really cared for each other, and I was glad Hector was able to get some form of happiness throughout all of this, at least. Unfortunately, we saw that this didn't last long. Isaac ended up coming for Hector, and instead of killing him like we initially thought, he decided to come to Hector's aid instead. Isaac said himself that he had a good bit of time to thank during his journey, and I'd like to think that the good people he did encounter along the way influenced the change we saw in Isaac's behavior. So instead of killing Hector for his betrayal, Isaac saw it as Hector having a moment of weakness and just being a victim of Carmilla's manipulation. So when Isaac did arrive in Styria, after smartly gathering and forming a massive army in a village where people were enslaved, he spared Lenore based on Hector's wishes. However, Lenore did not want to live in a cage forever and took some heated measures into her own hands. So again, the small amount of happiness that Hector was granted seemed to be revoked again, but at least he was alive. Lastly, I want to briefly get into the Carmilla versus Isaac and the fights. I must admit that the boss fight between Carmilla and Isaac was absolutely amazing. Now, I genuinely enjoyed all of the fights in Castlevania. All of them were exciting and pretty gory, which I enjoyed. But this fight just took the excitement to another level. I enjoyed every second of it, even the ones leading up to it. In the end, Carmilla was a bit selfish, and Isaac didn't get to deliver the final blow as she took that away from him. But at least she was gone, because I do agree with Isaac. She was way too unpredictable and too powerful, and that's a very dangerous combination. So I guess the very last thing to discuss involves Season 5. So while I wouldn't mind a 5th season, I don't think it's needed in this case. Even though I was worried for a second there, Trevor and Syfa got their happy ending, and it seems as if Alucard is working towards a brighter future, and I'm happy for him. I honestly feel like he went through a good bit during the entirety of Castlevania, and I think building and working towards his Belmont village idea will probably do wonders for his soul and mind. As far as Dracula and Lisa, I enjoyed the build up towards it, as well as the thrilling attempts to bring them back, and the many battles and fights that came as a result of that. However, I'd be satisfied if they just lived a quiet lifestyle and continued traveling around together. Overall, I don't have any complaints about this series, which is probably rare of me, but maybe that's a testament to just how good it is. I think this is something that I could sit down and watch again and not be bored of it. Unfortunately, I didn't get into every single detail I would have liked to, but I think I covered the gist and at least mentioned things in passing that I liked. However, how do you feel about Castlevania? Was there anything you didn't enjoy? And how would you feel about a 5th season? Is it necessary? As usual, thank you for tuning in. Sierra Nova is out.